Starting to feel like Jedd Fisch or bust for Michigan.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. Utah, without Kyle Whittingham, it's weird, but will it work? That's the question. JT Wistrcill will be here to discuss. Fernando Mendoza wins the Heisman, and Navy wins America's game in a thriller. That's on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So, Kalen DeBoer has spoken out, said, no, I'm not talking to anybody, I'm not going anywhere. Kenny Dillingham said he loves Arizona State, is reportedly working on an extension, and you just look around and go, who's Michigan hiring? And all of a sudden, my focus, and I think that of Michigan, is on Jedd Fisch. Because of all of these candidates, and you could throw Eli Drinkwitz's name in there, maybe there's a shadow candidate that we don't know about. You know, Brian Daboll was tossed around as a Penn State candidate when that coaching search was still going on. Is that somebody Michigan would consider hiring? Could they go and pull Jake Dickert from Wake Forest, formerly Washington State? Would they want to do that? I don't know. He just did an incredible job there at Wake Forest this season. I don't know. But what I do know is that Jedd Fisch hasn't announced an extension. I thought he would have by now. And ahead of the LA Bowl, which happened on Saturday, the last one ever, I know we're all really sad to see that particular matchup go away. Like, I'd be sad if the Pop-Tarts Bowl went away, but the LA Bowl I think we can do without and find a better replacement there. Jedd Fisch was asked, do you expect to be with Washington in 2026? And he said, yeah, I expect to be here. And then had this kind of, I don't know, sulky, resentful, ashamed sort of look on his face about him. You can go watch the video. You'll see exactly what I mean. I expect to be here. Nothing about what Jedd Fisch has said publicly indicates that he is not interested in the Michigan job or that he is 100% locked in to being Washington's head coach in 2026. And I don't know if this contributes to it in a major way or not, but his defensive coordinator was almost poached by Tennessee. Do you think he wants to keep being at a place? He's gone to a lot of different spots in his career. Does he want to keep being at a place where he can't keep his assistants as assistants? It's one thing when you're Alabama under Nick Saban and your assistants are just getting hired as head coaches all over the place. And Ryan Walters is still the defensive coordinator for Washington. He's a darn good one, by the way. And I'm sure he'd be on some short list if Jedd Fisch were to get hired away from Washington to Michigan there. But all this just keeps adding up. Nothing is everything. Everything is something. It's just a little thing here, a little thing there. I don't know where else they'd be looking. Unless there's a name that would completely and totally surprise us and keep us off guard, or catch us off guard, rather. I think Jedd Fisch is the leading candidate to be the next head coach at Michigan. Now, the interesting thing about that is when Jedd Fisch was first hired to be a head coach in college football, back at Arizona, I think the year was 2020. I think he got hired, 2020, 2021. That was quite the time. A simpler time, it felt. Anyway, he was not someone who was at the top of my mind or who was flying around. And then all of a sudden he got hired. And I think most people looked and went, what? Who? That's the option that Michigan would have to explore if they're not going down the Jedd Fisch rabbit hole. Maybe Eli Drinkwitz would leave Missouri. I don't know that I would. Missouri seems like a pretty good job. Is it as good as Michigan? No, I don't think so. But I don't think Missouri's a bad place to be. And every other musical chair has been filled for the coaching carousel. Unless you're pulling somebody down from the NFL, as Jedd Fisch was once upon a time, I think it's got to be Jedd Fisch. And by the way, there can, in these coaching searches, I think we saw this with Auburn in the John Sumrall discussion where he was, the lead target there, and then all of a sudden he goes and gets hired at Florida because he's a really good head coach, and I think he will do very well in Gainesville. Fans can develop a sense of fatigue in these sorts of things. Not fatigue of being tired that they don't have a head coach, but when one guy's name gets mentioned over and over and over, and the process goes on longer than you'd really think. Penn State fans never really had this because they were moving from one candidate to the other, wondering, are we going to get a head coach? We're really hiring the interim Terry Smith here, and then they wind up with Matt Campbell, and they saved it at the 11th hour. But it was, are we getting Matt Rule? Oh, Matt Rule got extended. What about Rhett Lash? Oh, he got extended at SMU. What about Kurtz? Oh, Kurtzing, he's staying at India. Well, what about? It was just it was just rotating. That hasn't been the case, I don't think, as much with this Michigan job, though we're starting to see that because DeBoer's saying, no, I'm not interested in going anywhere. And Kenny Dillingham saying, I love Arizona State, and they're working on an extension. But the fatigue with Jedd Fisch's name could be real if this hire doesn't get made in the next couple of weeks. And you can easily overlook the fact that Jedd Fisch is a really good football coach. He went to Arizona, and they had lost, I think it was 12 consecutive games as a program. At a school where traditionally they've had some good years, but they have not been a consistent power. And they were not in those old days of the Pac-12. RIP. They had their moments, but it was not the easiest place to win. So Kevin Sumlin had run them into the ground, and Jedd Fisch brought them back from the dead and made them a 10-win team that beat Oklahoma in a bowl game and won 10 games. So he went from that. They had at one moment lost about 20 games in a row. And then by the end, they were winning 10 games. And then he goes to Washington. And Kalen DeBoer did not leave the cupboards fully stocked. He did not recruit the way that you should at the University of Washington. And it also happened to coincide with this mass exodus of guys to graduation in the NFL. So he was basically starting from scratch. Came in year one, beat Michigan, didn't lose at home, and wound up going 6-7. And you know what? Making a bowl game in year one with that situation, not bad. And now you look at what they've done this season, and they just capped off a 9-win campaign. Are they an elite team in the Big Ten? No, they are not. But what he has proven at two different spots, Washington's a much better job than Arizona. And again, if I were Jedd Fisch, I'd stay at Washington. Because I do think he's building a foundation of prolonged success, recruiting the way that he should, winning games on the field, getting better year one to year two. But he spent 3 years at Arizona. He went 1 win, 5 win, 10 wins. He went to Washington, 6 wins, 9 wins. Who knows what they'd be set up for next year? Might depend on the sort of offseason that they have. But if Michigan winds up hiring Jedd Fisch, you're getting a guy that's proven at two places that are certainly not easier to win at than Michigan, has proven that he can build a winning culture and develop a winning football program. So I don't want there to be an element of Jedd Fisch fatigue. If he gets hired to be Michigan's next head coach, that's a good hire. No, it's not pulling Kurt Signet or pulling a rabbit out of the hat, but guess what? It'd be a darn good hire. And I think he's just about the only major guy left, unless, as I mentioned, there's a shadow candidate somewhere. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, however you want to get in touch. Utah, no Kyle Whittingham. Does that mean there's no problem? First, this episode brought to you by Aura Frames. The holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap. It's a way to share memories because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before gifting it, so when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. And I've seen these frames in person. Guys, they look great. They don't kill the aesthetic, and they let you have a better picture frame because you can enjoy multiple photos instead of just one. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames. Named #1 by Wirecutter by using the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's AURAFrames.com, Promo code college. This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast. So order yours now and get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Check them out at auraframes.com. Kyle Whittingham will coach his final game in Las Vegas against Nebraska. They will beat the living daylights out of the Cornhuskers, and then it will officially be the Morgan Scalley era in Salt Lake City. JT Wistrcill of Locked On Utes here to discuss. Did the news or timing of it surprise you at all, JT?
A little bit, just because it's Kyle Whittingham. It's always hard to predict. I have it on good authority. It's been reported on my show. Like, this was supposed to happen last year. Kyle Whittingham was supposed to step down last year, but he did not want to go out the way that he went out. I'll also just say this. There was a little bit of like, is he actually still going to retire? Because what happened? Yes, they had the 10-2 season, but they didn't win a Big 12 title. And what's the other thing? They didn't beat BYU. So, oh no, is he going to do this again? Is Morgan Scalley going to have to wait another year? But at the end of the day, it's a 10-2 season. You were a top 15 team in the country. Like, this is where, okay, come on, Kyle. You said you were getting close to the end. This feels like it was time. And he steps down. He didn't retire, by the way. That's what's weird. It's like, there's already a report, Stuart Mandel of The Athletic. Like, I'm sure we'll talk about it in a moment. Like, he's not retired. He's stepping down as Utah football's head coach, but he might still be doing other things in the coaching world. So yeah, the timing just on a Friday. Maybe the one before was just with all the stuff going on. I guess that's why he didn't do it the week before with National Signing Day and some things. I really don't know. It's Kyle Whittingham. It's hard to understand with what he does sometimes, but I'm glad they did it before the bowl game, because bowl attendance, bowl popularity has never been lower. So announce it before. You don't want to make it about yourself. I totally get that. You're not Coach K with Duke, right? Make it about your players for the season, but we can make the bowl game about you and get some more fans and butts in the seat for a Las Vegas bowl that, I agree, Spencer, shouldn't be very competitive based on where these two teams are headed. So yeah, definitely a little surprising based on the timing, but I'm glad it's official, because it feels like it's time for Morgan Scalley to take over, even though Kyle Whittingham has been everything for Utah football for the past 20 plus years.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it from that angle. And of course, there are direct flights from Vegas to Salt Lake, or it's about about a 6-hour drive from Salt Lake, depending on where you live. The last chance to watch Kyle Whittingham coach a Utah football team. Yeah, I bet that'll get a few more people down there to Allegiant Stadium. But you know, the reports from a couple folks at The Athletic that, you know, he's stepping down, not retiring, still open to coaching opportunities. I didn't take that. I considered it, but I can't see him being the next head coach at Michigan. Like, can you? Like, that just feels like a little bit much, doesn't it?
I got to be honest. I can see a path for it.
Really?
Simply as a 1-year thing. 1 year, the Frank Reich thing they just did with Stanford. I don't think it gets much better than Kyle Whittingham. In late December, you need some type of a coach. If you are Michigan, you need to nail this hire. You do not want to, we got to get a head coach in because we want to set his vision for the next 5 years. No, if you botch this, you set yourself back 5 years. I would much rather say, hey, we have Wink Martindale there, still a really good defensive coordinator, right? We have Bryce Underwood. The offense should still be really good. What if we brought Kyle Whittingham in just to kind of like steady the ship, make sure everything was good, and then we get a head start on our coaching search and cycle next year when we have our pick of the litter on the candidates, because it's the best job next year, right? I mean, the Michigan job, I don't see another job that would rival it. I don't know who's going to take it. I know that DeBoer put out a statement that he's focused on right now. He hasn't signed anything as of what I've heard, but I don't think it gets much better for a 1-year type of thing than Kyle Whittingham, who's been incredibly successful. Let's not forget, back in 2010, he actually passed on the Tennessee job to stay at Utah. So he's won at a high level. I think for a 1-year type of thing, he would make a lot of sense for Michigan. And then next year, it's like, hey, this is clearly a 1-year thing. Then let's go in another direction. But I don't see Kyle Whittingham becoming the head coach at Michigan and like, this is going to be the next 5-year thing. No, the only way I see it is a 1-year type of thing. And if I was Michigan, like I'd much rather put a Band-Aid on it this year than try to make the wrong hire. So that's to me where I could see Kyle Whittingham in Ann Arbor in 2026.
You make a compelling argument there. He could be a pretty perfect transitionary coach. It might be a tough sell to players that you're going to play for a guy for an entire season and go through a whole off season with somebody that is not going to be there come 2027. Maybe some guys or most of the guys or enough of the guys are loyal enough to the maize and blue that that's okay with them. But man, I would have to imagine that would at least be difficult to keep everybody around that you want. Of course, Bryce Underwood's the most important, but we all know they're also built along that offensive line. Stylistically, of course, Michigan and Kyle Whittingham, makes plenty of sense. I feel like Whittingham saying, I still want to do some coaching stuff. If he were going to be a head coach, I think he would just stay at Utah and try to get Morgan Scalley the best head coaching job he could elsewhere, give him every letter of recommendation, and be a good reference for any school that would go out and need a head coach. But I feel like he wants to go to the NFL maybe and be like an assistant or an advisor or assistant head coach. That feels more realistic to me.
And I totally agree with that, because Kyle Whittingham has even, like, over the course of the years taken a step back from Utah. Like, Morgan's been doing head coach stuff and other people have been stepping up behind the scenes as Kyle Whittingham has taken a step back. But make no mistake, like, Kyle Whittingham was locked in on the sideline. Like, watch the way that man coaches. Looks like he still has some fire in the tank. But I do agree, Spencer. I think it's more likely that he's an NFL assistant in some capacity. Advisory role, I feel like, is what he's more looking for here. I'd be interested to see how he would do on TV as very smooth delivery, but the personality, sometimes I'm curious to see if he would amp that up a little bit. But yeah, I think it's more just about the timing for Michigan is why I look at it. I'm like, if you want to still have a really good coach while not botching your search, because, I know you talked about Jedd Fisch early, like, does that get the Michigan alumni really excited? Or is this the kind of thing where Jedd Fisch is there and he's there for 2 years and then they fire him, not because it's really fair to Jedd Fisch, but because, he wasn't a Michigan man. He wasn't our guy. He wasn't our hire. That's where Kyle for 1 year, and then we do all the cycle in the search next year, to me makes more sense. But yeah, the only thing I'll say about Kyle to Michigan too is Michigan clearly gives you a better chance than Utah to win a national championship. So Kyle stayed loyal for so long. Maybe this is one opportunity, is a one-time thing. He's like, okay, I am interested in this. Is Michigan interested in him? Does Kyle want to be a head coach? Continued to be. I mean, it seems like he would consider it based on the fact that he didn't say he was retiring in his statement, just that he was stepping down as Utah football's head coach. But you're right. There's a lot of layers to this, and the timing is really what gives Kyle Whittingham a shot in this. Had this whole thing happened with Sherrone Moore right a month ago, I don't think we're talking about Kyle Whittingham. It's more so just, as I said, Band-Aid on it that I could see. But I also agree with you, Spencer. It's much more likely he's an advisor. He's just still doing things in the world of football rather than the head coach on the sideline at Michigan. But as you know, because this is Locked On College football is a crazy sport and wild things can happen. So Kyle Whittingham on the sideline at Michigan, honestly, wouldn't be the craziest thing I've seen this year by a long shot.
No. I mean, we've seen Sherrone Moore in prison.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that'd have to be up there with one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Remember when my beloved Trailblazers had to fire Chauncey Billups because of that scandal?
It was like a month ago, by the way.
Yeah, that was
the whole Lane
that was
Kiffin
so
thing.
uninteresting compared to every coaching story that's come about since then. Yeah. Bringing this back to Utah, though, JT, your confidence that Morgan Scalley keeps them at a Big 12 championship level for the next several years?
Extremely high. I think when you have a coach moving on like Kyle Whittingham is, your dream candidate is someone like a Morgan Scalley, a player who played at Utah, who's been here forever, who is also an elite coordinator. I think about Ohio State when they were transitioning away from Urban Meyer. They already had Ryan Day in the building. Oklahoma with Bob Stoops. They already had Lincoln Riley in the building. I know less said about what Lincoln Riley ended up doing there after he left, but right now you're talking about Kyle Whittingham moving on. This right here, Morgan Scalley, a Utah man taking over. I think he's one of the 10 best defensive coordinators in the country. Like, what he gets year in and year out of this Utah defense, it's incredible. This is a guy who shut down Lincoln Riley a couple times, right? People forget. USC wins that Pac-12 title game in 22. They're in the playoff, but Morgan Scalley and the Utah defense got in the way. And so often we talk about how hard it is to play at Rice-Eccles Stadium. Yes, the fans, the third down, all that stuff, like the craziness of it makes it a tough place to play. But it's also Morgan Scalley that blitzes the plays he designs up. Like, just so often we see offenses come in against a Utah defense. And I know we gave up a lot of rushing yards the last 2 games, but overall, Morgan Scalley has been one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. He is a Utah man. He's been instrumental in Utah's recruiting efforts. He's done a great job recruiting Texas over the years. I think he is absolutely ready to have this program in a position to continue to compete with Big 12 titles, especially as Spencer, I know you saw last week, we're making some news off the field as well. So sounds like the NIL resources will hopefully be there to help what I think is a really great future Utah coach in Morgan Scalley. Absolutely the right choice for the job.
That's certainly the plan. That's the mission. That's the idea of bringing in outside money. We'll see. JT Wistrcill, Locked On Utes. He of No Shave November fame for those watching on YouTube. The Heisman Trophy went to Fernando Mendoza. Not a big surprise, but was it actually the right decision? First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. NFL Sundays, they move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And college football playoff gets in action this week. 4 first-round games on campus. We need more of that. If you think you know how it's going down, if you think Oklahoma's beating Alabama again, Oregon's rolling James Madison, Miami's knocking off Texas A&M, Tulane's upsetting Ole Miss, or at least covering, whatever you feel like is going down, you can put your knowledge to the test with FanDuel because they've got point spreads, they've got point totals, they've got money line, props, everything you want. FanDuel has you covered. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. So Fernando Mendoza wins the Heisman Trophy. And no, it was not the most impressive statistical season that we've ever seen. By the way, did you know this is the Big Ten's first Heisman Trophy winner since 2006? Troy Smith was the last one. Go look at the lineup of past Heisman Trophy winners. SEC's in there, Pac-12 is in there, ACC's in there, Big 12 is in there. Big Ten hasn't seen a Heisman Trophy winner in a hot minute. Indiana hasn't seen one ever in the history of its program, which is really why he won the award, because Indiana just beat Ohio State, which is certifiably insane, patently absurd, completely out of the realm of what should be possible, and yet Curt Cignetti and Fernando Mendoza just pulled that off and won the Big Ten. They had not just failed to win a Big Ten championship in my lifetime. Indiana, or probably your lifetime, depending on how old you are. I see my demographic numbers. Some of you might have seen it. Most of you didn't. Most of you probably didn't even have your parents around and alive the last time Indiana won a Big Ten football championship. It has been a very, very long time. So Indiana being in that position is why Mendoza gets this award. Yes, he was incredibly clutch. Game-winning drives on the road against Oregon in the College Game Day matchup and against Penn State on the road as well. His numbers in those games are not going to blow you away. Diego Pavia has got more total yards and more total touchdowns than Fernando Mendoza this season. So why does Mendoza get the Heisman? Because what we have seen throughout the course of the last many years is it doesn't always go to the player with the best individual season. Sometimes it does. Jaden Daniels had the best numbers in 2023. Michael Penix's team was having the better season. So Fernando Mendoza and Indiana were able to get the benefit of the doubt that Michael Penix and his Washington team, by association, were not able to get from the Heisman voters. And I don't have any issue with Fernando Mendoza winning the Heisman Trophy because he's had an incredible season. He's a great player. He has outperformed my expectations. I did not see this from him when the season began. And to have Indiana in this spot, you know, that cliche you've probably heard many a times when you watch the Heisman ceremony, which is among the biggest teases that ESPN puts out as a television product, because holy smokes, we're going to show you this. We're going to show you every single finalist's 6-year-old highlights in the backyard. We're going to do this for a full hour, and then we're going to tell you who wins. Like, why don't you just... You could condense it down a little bit, ESPN. Just scotch. Anyway, I digress. Mendoza winning this really fulfills the cliche. This isn't just my award. This is a team award. It really is. Do I think that's what the Heisman Trophy should be? No. If I were voting, would I have voted for Fernando Mendoza over Diego Pavia? Frankly, I might have just said, let's not do the Heisman Trophy this year, because I don't think any of these guys have had Heisman caliber seasons compared to what we've seen in years past. But the team success of Indiana is what put Mendoza over the top. Well, is that what the Heisman Trophy is supposed to be about? Because Indiana's defense is spectacular. Well, Vanderbilt's is not. Vanderbilt is Diego Pavia, and that's it. And I do find Diego Pavia's actions after all of this, posted on social media, F the voters, and, you know, there's a video of him going around flipping off some sign that says Indiana, anything like that. It's childish. It's not particularly mature. Am I going to sit here and pretend to be wildly offended by Diego Pavia is killing college football? Man, No, he's not. He's not being as ridiculous as Notre Dame collectively after they got correctly left out of the college football playoff. That's not on the same level. Is it a good look? No, it isn't. If you want to dislike him for that, that's fine. I think that's your prerogative, and I don't have a huge objection to it either way. But Mendoza winning this award, again, just makes me feel confused. What is it? What is it that we are rewarding? Because the best individual statistical season does not belong to Fernando Mendoza. He should have been a finalist, of course. Of course. But why isn't Julian Sayin getting more respect? Would that be because he's being incredibly well supported by the team around him and he's just playing really well? Well, Mendoza's got more talent around him than Diego Pavia does at Vanderbilt. And the whole story about Mendoza taking Indiana to a place they've never been before, which I still can't believe is the real world that I'm talking about here on the show, it absolutely applies to Vanderbilt. They didn't make the playoff. You know why? They don't have as good of a team. But Diego Pavia had the better individual season with the same exact sort of hurdles that Mendoza dealt with at Indiana. And that's that you're coming from a place that's never even sniffed this level of success before. Vanderbilt won 10 games in a season for, I think, the first time ever, or I don't even remember. I lost track in my head at the number of unique achievements these guys have helped their programs get to over the last couple of years. Indiana had never had a 10-win season before last year. Vanderbilt was ranked inside the top 10 at one point this year. They'd never done that before. They beat number 1 ranked Alabama as a 22.5-point home dog last season. Does Diego Pavia not have enough narrative support? Like, what is it exactly? And I get the sense that it's the one, that it's that number 1 next to Indiana's name, and that they won the Big Ten championship that puts them over the top. Well, Mendoza made the play to go ahead of Ohio State in that game. Made the throw, receiver makes an incredible catch. Pretty sure it was Elijah Surratt, because of course it was. Okay, I'm on board with Mendoza being in New York City. But the Heisman's supposed to be an individual award, because the Indiana defense, last I checked, held Ohio State to their worst point total of the season. It's the worst the offense has looked since week 1, when Julian Sayin was starting as a college quarterback for the first time against Texas, who has a great defense. I just cannot get behind the inconsistency with the Heisman voters over the years. Here, we're going to reward the biggest gripe I will ever have with the Heisman voters, and people have plenty. It is not Ashton Jeanty not winning last year. I said I would have voted for Ashton Jeanty if I had a vote. I don't have one. This year, I probably would have landed on Diego Pavia, because I think this is an individual award. But just give me some consistency. Mendoza winning and Penix not is inconsistent. Jaden Daniels had the better statistical season. Well, Diego Pavia had the better statistical season. What's the difference? What am I missing? What's the criteria? I wish we could just be more consistent with it. So, is it the end of the world? I mean, no. Like, Mendoza's a worthy Heisman winner for what he's done there. But is it exactly right? No, not really. All right, real quick, and then I get out of here. Just a 60-second closing thought on Army-Navy, America's game. I love this matchup every year. It looks the same. The uniforms, spectacular. I thought Navies were good. I thought Armies were great. Navy wins the game 17-16. I got a point spread pick correct. Line provided by our friends at FanDuel, of course. That's not the only reason that I bring it up. Maybe I'm about to get hot going through the college football playoff. We'll just have to wait and see. But if you did not see, at least go on YouTube and find yourself the highlights so you can see the madness that unfolded in this game. Because Navy, in the same game, fumbled at the 1-yard line, stripped Army's recovery, and then scored on 4th and goal from the 8 for teams that are barely capable of completing a forward pass. And then also had Blake Horvath, with the most calm, cool, and collected moment I've ever seen, have the ball popcorn out of his hands on a quarterback run into the crowd. He gets it back and reaches forward, and then they go for it on 4th down, and you knew they were running. Everybody at the line of scrimmage, who's more physical, who can get the push. Navy wins America's game 17-16. 10-2. 10-2 Navy goes. It's a good season. It's just an awesome football game, and it doesn't need to have bigger ramifications. It doesn't need to have some statement. It's a great football game across the board, and it always is every year. So well done to Navy that overcame a deficit, by the way. That's not something that typically happens with a 4th and goal from the 8-yard line. I tell you what, that was some kind of football game. I might go back and figure out how I can watch the whole thing again because it was just that much fun. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.